I am supposed to be transcribing something for one of our friends. I've been trying to get into a band for a long time. She wanted to learn Skater Boy by whatever that was. Um, so I'm working on that, but I keep getting in my feed this video. I hated FRFR until I learned this, and it looks like a clickbait thing, and I'm wondering just how far into this 17-minute video it's going to be before they actually tell us why he did whatever to FRFR whatever. And I'm doing so much on full range flat response speakers lately because of all the guitar modeling stuff that's going on. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are just in a matter of the last few months of completely changing the guitar landscape. And so the not that you can't use these with regular cabinets, but in general, I think for the most part, people are going to be using them with full range flat response speakers. And so I'm probably searching more for FRFR stuff lately, and somehow this clickbaity looking thing ended up in my feed. So I'm going to check it out while I'm trying to find the best version of this song to cut up so she can learn this thing. So let's see what this guy has to say. And like I warn you, it could just be clickbait. Anytime they don't actually put the specifics in the title, it's going to be some kind of clickbait nonsense. I'm not sure who this is. Matthew Dale, he's got 2.7K subscribers. I already made a little comment on here based on part of what I heard, but let's just play my guitar.
Sound great and understand more. If you're joining me for the first time, welcome to the channel. If you have seen me before, then welcome back. Today's topic is going to be dealing with FRFR, whether that's an FRFR system like a modern day PA or FRFR cabinets that we are using with our modelers, and if you're like me, that would be like an Axe-Fx or an FM3 or an FM9 or a Helix or a Kemper or that stuff as well. So first, let's get a couple of misconceptions out of the way. Using an FRFR cabinet or going through an FRFR speaker is not going to magically make you sound better for whatever particular reason. FRFR stands for Full Range Flat Response. So it's really just giving us a definition of what the speaker is meant to do. And when we say full range, we're talking 20 hertz roughly to 20,000 hertz roughly. That's the scope of human hearing at its best. And the flat response means that the speaker would be able to reproduce those low frequencies around 20 hertz just as well as the mid frequencies and the high frequencies. They would be reproduced at roughly the same level, giving you a flat response. Now, just at face value, this actually doesn't give us any benefits being guitar players because the speakers that we usually play through, i.e. guitar cabinets or guitar speakers, do not have a full range or a flat response. Something like a Celestion Greenback really kind of starts to roll off around...
Wait a second, that's not strictly true. I mean, let's say you want a really, really, really clean guitar signal. Maybe you're running an acoustic simulator or something. The regular guitar cabinet's going to roll off at 5K or whatever, and you won't be able to get the highs and stuff that you would get from running an acoustic guitar through a PA speaker. So that's really not strictly true what he just said, but I don't know that it matters for this. Or let's say you have a guitar synth and you really want the highs and lows from that keyboard that, again, wouldn't be able to play through a regular 12-inch guitar speaker. You need that extra bottom and extra top
response. Something like a Celestion Greenback really kind of starts to roll off around 100 hertz, maybe a little bit above, and then really kind of cuts off around 5,000 hertz. That's a very limited scope of the spectrum that we can hear. So oftentimes when people think, modeling or digital or FRFR, they think of this shrill, high-end frequency stuff happening that really isn't so much a result of the digital part, but it's more of a result of producing those frequencies that are then represented within an FRFR.
Well, plug your Marshall into a PA speaker and you'll get the same thing. I don't know, it doesn't have anything to do with digital or any of that stuff.
our system, and they wouldn't be in a system that's including, guitar speakers on the end of the chain. I've got a pretty good story about this as well. So a few months ago, I was sitting in with one of my friend's bands, and they came over to my studio to rehearse, and I told him, he was using a Kemper, I said, hey, you don't need to bring a guitar cabinet with you if you don't want to for rehearsals. You can just go ahead and plug straight into my board and run through my systems. In my studio, I'm using QSC K10s, and they are, a full range, flat response, pretty good quality PA speaker. And it's what I use to dial in my tones as well. So sure enough, he said, yeah, that sounds great. I can bring less gear. Well, when he came in, he turned his cabinet modeling on, and we plug him into the system, and he hears his tone, and he's like, wow, this is very different than what I'm used to, which of course it is, because he's usually going into a power amp and then into a guitar cabinet. So going FRFR, you're going to initially hear all the extra low end and high end that's in your guitar chain. Now,
if you don't have your speaker simulator on, but that's the whole point of running these modelers.
Another misconception is that we're trying to achieve some kind of amp in the room tone within these systems. Now, we are trying to go for good tone, and we'll get to the good tone part here in a bit.
Right, this whole amp in the room tone, I keep hearing people talk about how it's some impossible thing to get to. And, they're always complaining that FRFRs and all these modeling things, it's the impulses are usually an impulse of, your speaker with your mic chain the way you wanted it, mic'd up the way you would in the studio. And I know religiously people don't believe this, but it's just an EQ. It's just an EQ. It's just an EQ. I know you guys aren't going to believe this. I know people always fight about this, but when it comes down to it, it's just an EQ. So if you can subtract that mic from the speaker's response, or if you, say, took an Omni mic and put it at your position in the room and got a frequency response from there, put it on a spectrum analyzer, and then made an EQ that fit that same spectrum analyzer, you've got your amp in a room. This whole amp in a room thing is so constantly done over and over and over to death. On the other hand, I'm really trying to figure out, I don't know what this, I don't want to play it, I don't want to get DMCA'd, but I'm not sure what this Skater Boy thing's actually supposed to sound like. There's several different ways these people are showing how to play it, and I'm not really sure which one is the right one. Anyway.
But amp in the room is really kind of this different phenomenon. One, we'll talk about position here in a little bit, but typically you've got, whether it's a combo amp or maybe a half stack, that's not exactly going up to your ears. That's going to go more towards the lower part of your body. So you're going to hear things different. You're going to perceive things different there. Typically, a lot of guitar amplifiers are really loud, and we've got a lot more control over an FRFR with the loudness that we are putting out. So generally, in my experience, all of my guitar amps have always run a lot louder than I would typically run my studio speakers, whether that be my monitors up here or my K10s that are down on the floor. And the final note I'll say on that is that when we dial in IRs, we also have another part of the signal, which is a microphone. So all of our IRs are also shot with a microphone. So really what we're hearing when we listen through...
This is the funnest one, I think. So yeah, we were just talking about that. So, the sound of a guitar amp, even though these guys always insist on micing their amps for recording and stuff, is nothing to do with what you hear in the room. Like you stick that mic like half an inch away from the speaker in a place you would never dare to put your ears. And somehow that's that's the more legit, more real sound. I don't think so. But I mean, it is the sound of an amp getting mic'd up, and so is an impulse. So just remember that when they talk about, it's got to be this perfect thing, and yet they are, think about where you put recording mics compared to where you'd actually put your ears.
guitars through one of these speakers, especially if we're using cabinet modeling, which you should be, is our guitar plugged into, pedals or effects, into an amplifier, into a speaker cabinet, and then mic'd with a very particular mic.
Okay, so we're 4 minutes in here. And I hated FRFR until I learned this. What did you learn? I'm still waiting to hear what you learned there. All right. I know.
And that mic matters. The distance that mic was used when capturing matters. The environment that it was in matters. All these things really matter, which is why it's going to be different than an amp in the room experience, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad experience. So with all of these things, why would we want to run FRFR? And really the answer is for convenience and consistency. The convenience part is pretty easy to recognize since, it eliminates the amount of stuff that we would potentially need to take to a gig. If I go to a venue that has a nice PA system and I can just run, direct XLRs to front of house, then, I could just take my FM3 and I would be good to go. Now, as far as consistency is concerned, because we're
it's not just convenience. I want
using systems labeled FRFR
in the recording studio. I want my studio sound on my when I go live. I want to know, when you're talking consistency, it's not just convenience. It's never mind. You don't have to carry this giant 4x12 around, but having an idea what sound is going to come out, that's something you want. All right, so I'm trying to do two things at once here.
With a, relatively speaking, full range flat response, we can dial in our guitar tone with that in mind that will play nice across a lot of different systems and speakers. If we dial in a great guitar tone in our studios through an FRFR, chances are that when we go to a venue that's running, nice quality PA speakers, that it's going to sound really good and it's going to be really easy for the engineer to handle, giving everyone a better experience. But it's really within how to deal with that full range that can separate really good guitar tone from really bad guitar tone. So here's some tips and tricks for dialing in for FRFR. I'm going to give you the first general principles first, and then we'll dive into the software and I'll show you how I do it in the Axe-Fx stuff. So the first tip that I will give you is to be loud. You want to be dialing in your tones at roughly gig volume, which might look like 90 decibels or so. The Fletcher-Munson effect tells us that human hearing perceives different frequencies at different loudness levels. So if we want to dial in for the best tone live, then yes, turn it up. Another thing to take note of would be, what is the position of your speakers in your space? Are they up on speaker stands, or are they, down on the floor as a floor wedge? Both are a little bit different, and they're definitely
this is why I like the Celestion F12 X200s, whatever, than other speakers where you got a concentric tweeter. It's a very handy thing. At least the directivity should be a little bit better. And a 12-inch speaker is mostly an omnidirectional thing, and it's going to get a little bit less omnidirectional as the frequency goes up, and we're going to have all these crossover problems, phase alignment, things like that. But in general, you got a concentric tweeter and you're in pretty good shape.
Different than, say, a guitar speaker cabinet that, like I said earlier, is pointing at your feet or at your ankles. It's going to be very different. You're going to perceive the high end a lot differently. And if you do have your speakers on the floor tilted at an angle, chances are those speakers are actually going to build up more low-end frequencies, especially if they're up against a wall. So those are a couple of environmental things that I want you to be aware of when you're dialing in FRFR. The next thing that sort of bridges the gap from here into, the software, the Axe-Fx stuff that we'll get to in a second, would be having a couple of really good go-to IRs. The IR matters so much in this stuff, where it can really sort of make or break your tone. And moving from one IR to the next within a preset with amps that are dialed in to suit one IR may really sound terrible on another IR. Luckily for you, I've already done some homework for you. I've got a bunch of my favorite IRs listed in my Fractal Favorite Amps and Cabs guide that you can find in the link in the description below. So you could use that as a really good starting point to find some IRs that you really like. Now, if you want to take this a step further, you could also hit the link right below that to check out my templates. I've got 10 of my favorite amplifiers dialed in with my favorite IRs to give you great tone almost immediately. Just drag and drop and bam, you're set to go. So if you want to check that out, again, that is in the description below. Okay, so now on the software or on the Axe-Fx side of things, here is my general chain. I've got, of course, my in and out blocks and my amp blocks. I'm gonna dial in a Fender and a Marshall here.
All right, so we're halfway through. Where's the until I learn this part? Or is this whole thing this? What did we learn so far? Use an IR, which you'd have to be insane not to with the modeler. I mean, unless you're really trying to get some kind of crazy fizz thing. All
right, for this example, and then of course we have a cab block. If we're going direct, if we're using FRFR and not using a guitar speaker cabinet on stage, we need the cab block in here, you know, most of the time, 99.9% of the times. Sometimes with clean tones, you can get away with not using a cab block. Check out some of Brett Kingman's videos on.
Sometimes it depends on not having a speaker. Sometimes you're playing an acoustic guitar through a PA system. Sometimes you're playing a clean guitar straight to the console. Sorry, keep going.
On the Axe-Fx, and he gets like an 80s direct console type of tone on his Axe-Fx without using a cab block, and that's kind of interesting. So now the first thing I do before I go up setting up tones or dialing in tones is really get my cabinet in check. I already mentioned the importance of IRs earlier, and if you can just have one, if you could have, you know, say like a Desert Island IR or something like that, for me, it would be a great set of greenbacks. So I'm going to go up to my picker, and I have these organized with the colors, so green for greenbacks. I know the Bogners are redbacks, but you get the idea. And these, the Marshall Checkerboard Pre-Rolla G12H55, a lot of stuff there. I've got that. That's Factory Bank 2, 761, and then my other one in tandem that I use with that is the one that's shot with the 121. So it's 761 and 763. Those are my preferred greenback IRs inside of this. Yes, there's like 2,000 IRs. I could narrow it down to just one set of cabinets, and it's these guys for me. Your mileage may vary, but I really like these cabinets. But I don't like them right in this configuration. One, I do like to pan them hard left and right. That's just for my, you know, stereo benefit. I like that. You could also mix them in mono and do.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Do that sort of thing. Stereo benefit, I like that. You could also mix them in mono and do that sort of thing. And then over on the preamp side of things, the filter is already set up, you know, to really go FRFR, 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. But I don't want all of that information. I want significantly less information. I want everything above 80 hertz and everything below 8,000 hertz. Now going from 20,000 all the way down to 8,000 might seem like a pretty aggressive cut, and when I first got into digital modeling, I thought it was too, but actually it's not enough, and we'll see a little bit later.
Let me know if you've heard anything that you haven't heard before. Like, everybody tries to run these low-pass filters all the time, right? Have you ever seen a video where they didn't? All right, keep going.
Also change the slope down here to 12. So I've got.
Is this like 10 years old or 13 years old or 20 years old or something? No, it's 7 months ago. Come on.
12 decibels per octave. I got a pretty aggressive slope on the side of 80 hertz and 8,000 hertz. Now, after that, then I'm actually ready to start dialing in my amp. I've got my cabinet taken care of. Now we can start with the amp. So this is the Fender Twin, or as per Axe-Fx, double verb vibrato channel. I'm using my McCarty 594 middle position here, and this is what it sounds like right off the bat. So things sound pretty good stock. I prefer to have less bass in this because I got my speakers turned up quite a bit. And there's a bit of woof down there, so I want to take out bass, and I've gone all the way down to 2 with this amp, you know. that cleans up a lot of stuff there. I'm really kind of getting a little bit more into that Fender realm now. And then I might do a little bit of the Magic 6s. So we'll do that on 6 and maybe that on 6 as well. And then, you know, dial into taste. Now let's take a look at the Marshall. This is the JM45. And this is a pretty loud amplifier, so I'm gonna move it down to, let's see. That should be pretty good. Again, pretty bass heavy, right? A lot of these are, because guitar cabinets were never really good at recreating bass. So early amp designers put in a lot of bass in their amplifier. So again, I'm going to turn this down probably to 2 or so on the bass. I could even go probably as far down as nothing. I like that quite a bit, maybe just at 1 for all you at home. And usually with like a Marshall, like a Plexi style or something Marshall-y, I like to do the same thing, kind of boost the treble up and the mid up. This isn't so much a guitar tone as it is, you know, dialing in guitar tone with FRFR, so take it with a grain of salt. I like the sound of that. That sounds good. And let's drive this a little bit more. That's the bridge pickup. Still has a lot of nice low end. It's still thick sounding, but I'm getting all of the excess bass out of the way for my bass player for a stage. Now the next thing that I would do, again, for those rogue frequencies is pull in a parametric EQ. I have a separate video on parametric EQ, which you can check out. I will link it in the end screen at the end of this video. But if you don't want to go through the process of really EQing an IR, just doing a simple blocking filter on either side of this parametric EQ is going to be a great starting point. So blocking over on the first band and then the second band, and then this is where I make more aggressive cuts. Let's do 24 decibels per octave on either side, and let's pull this down to 100. And let's pull this up to 6,500 is usually where I start with this stuff, but I'm actually going to go down to 5,000 so you can hear what that sounds like as well. So here's the Marshall parametric EQ on. And let's go over to the Fender with the parametric EQ on. Again, we're going through the same IR. I'm going to switch to my neck pickup.
Man, the Axe Effects is pretty awesome in its routing and setup. I really love my Helix, but this is actually pretty cool.
Doesn't sound like we're missing anything with those aggressive cuts, right? It still sounds good. Now let's go ahead and dial this back one more time. This time let's go to 5,000. It still has some nice brightness to it. Let's hear the Marshall. So I'm really not sacrificing a ton of high end there. If you're listening on a lower volume amount, it might sound a little bit dull, but at higher volumes, it actually sounds really good. Now, the last thing that I would do, because going direct or using an FRFR can sound so dead sometimes, is definitely add a bit of reverb. Now, I personally really like the sound of reverb. If you are not much of a reverb person, still go ahead and throw in a reverb here or there. Let's just pull up this stock medium room and let's just hear what this sounds like now. Again, I'm on the Marshall still. Now let's go over to the Fender. So just a little bit of extra space can really get you in the realm of, you know, feeling like it is a part of the room that you're in. So there you have it. I hope you learned something. I hope you found some of that stuff interesting, and
honestly,
I hope...
no. Okay, so I'm sorry. We just spent 25 minutes, and I still don't know. I hated FRFR until I learned this, what this is really. I guess put a speaker cabinet on it, make some high pass filter and low pass filter cuts, and put a reverb on it, I guess. Sorry for anybody's time I wasted.